What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, we're going to talk about Spider-Man 2. So I know I had people asking me about this. I didn't really know how to word this video. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I want to talk about co-op with this game, with Spider-Man 2, the future Spider-Man game. But I also want to talk about a couple other features I think will be included in this game now that Miles is done. So this is going to, by the way, touch upon spoiler stuff, like story stuff for the ending of Miles Morales, but it's also going to be more heavily talking about the features that I think Spider-Man 2 will have, okay? So if you haven't beat Miles, maybe skip this video, come back once you beat it, and we'll go from there, okay? Now, really quickly, if you guys aren't already subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit the bell icon so you guys know when all these videos go up. I've been covering Miles daily for the last several days. I'm going to be keeping it up. There's still going to be a video, hopefully every single day or every other day. We'll keep somewhat of a schedule going, right? I have a Twitter, Podcast Now 15. I have a Discord. I have a second channel called Podcast Now Plus. If you guys haven't checked any of those out, they'll all be in the description below. I want to talk about the gameplay first. Obviously, the story is equally, if not, sometimes story in these games may be more important to some people. Maybe the gameplay is more important. The gameplay I want to talk about because I think we've talked about this before, but I think it couldn't be more clear what they are doing with a Spider-Man 2. Now, again, this is going to be spoilers for Miles Morales. What you see in this game is, I think, well, obviously it's bringing Miles into his own, right? Proving he can handle like a big-time thing, right? Being able to handle being a Spider-Man, basically, or being Spider-Man. But in the beginning, in terms of like actual gameplay and cutscenes, and then the end with the cutscene with Spider-Man, again, setting up being like a duo. Now, in the beginning of the game, when you're chasing Rhino and you're fighting Rhino, I mean, you're doing it with Peter. And you're swinging around, he's doing stuff, you're doing stuff, then you have to split up and he's on Rhino, just smashing through buildings and objects while you're fighting goons, which, by the way, is just really, really amazing, and it's actually kind of crazy the technology allows us to do like those kind of things simultaneously. It's incredible. But what I believe they're kind of setting up there is like, okay, we can have a game in which two people are doing stuff. Again, the ending, pretty much the ending of Miles is, all right, we finished the kind of standalone story we did in Miles. There'll obviously be a couple different attributes or things that kind of follow us through to Spider-Man 2, but Miles and Peter are ready to take on the city, take on any criminals in the city together, and we see them swinging away together at the end of this game. Now, I think, and we've been kind of theorizing this going into Miles Morales, that would they set up you playing as like a duo, you playing as like a co-op thing. Now, we never actually get to do both, right? We don't get to play as Miles and then jump over to Spider-Man or like Peter and then jump back, right? We don't get to do that. But I think, that's my theory, 100% sure that's going to happen in the next game. It's going to be quite a jump, and there's a lot of worries, honestly. Like, I don't want to immediately go to like negatives, but there are worries with having a game centered on two people instead of one. Now you have to share it. With that being said, the original, 2018 Spider-Man, you played as Peter. You played as actual Peter. You played as Spider-Man. You played as Miles. You played as MJ. So that game also had you split up. But when you were in the suit, when you were doing, I don't know, most of the fun stuff, would we consider it the fun stuff, right? When you're swinging around the city, when you're fighting, when you're doing all the different stuff, you're playing as Spider-Man, right? So in the next game, if you're playing as both of them and you can swap, again, you got to be careful with that because you don't want to leave one out. You don't want to make one feel maybe less powerful. Now, again, the game will be called Spider-Man 2, so obviously the more of the focus, I think, would still be on Peter, would still be on Spider-Man. But the thing is, again, and I think he would get more time. Maybe it's like a 60-40 thing, maybe a 70-30 thing, but you would play as Miles, and then again, you can't make Miles super. Maybe you could make him weaker, and that would be a cool gameplay mechanic, but there is worry there, right? I'm not 100% sold on the idea that there'll be like GTA style switching, that maybe you're like swinging in the city as Peter, as Spider-Man, and then immediately you can just swap and Miles. However, imagine how, I want you guys to think about this, and GTA did this as well. When you swap into somebody, they're doing something. They're living their life, which is a good trait of an open world game. So say you're swinging, in the city as Peter, and you say, okay, I want to switch to Miles really fast, and you switch to Miles, and he's in the middle of like a car chase, right? And you're just picking up, and you're immediately there. Also, with the super fast, SSD and being able to just jump immediately into that, that would be, I shouldn't say, because I don't want to act like it's literally already real, but at the same time, they're probably making it. It's probably somewhat close to being done. Like, that would be absolutely insane. And I think, honestly, they would kind of focus, I would say, the draw of a Spider-Man 2 on that kind of thing, where it's like, okay, you've played as one of these guys before, and even in just superhero games in general. I mean, in Batman, even in the Arkham games, like, you can play briefly as other characters, but not to really explore the city and stuff like that, not to really, like, have them be their own, right? For this, you'd maybe have a different skill tree for Miles than you have for Peter. You'd have to level them up. They would have different suits, and you could have them switch suits. Maybe they could even change suits on you. So if I'm playing as Miles, maybe Peter changes his suit, and then you go back into Peter. I think that would be absolutely incredible. So I'm calling it right now, some sort of GTA-style cooperative. Now, you could say, do they do a Gotham Knights thing where you could play, or even Avengers, where you have online people play? Not 100%. Again, sold on that. Not 100% sure that I want that. That adds an entire different layer to the game. It honestly changes what the game is if you allow. So when I say co-op, I guess I really mean like playing as both of them. You can play as Spider-Man and you can play as Miles. That's kind of what I mean. I don't necessarily mean you can sit with a friend, although that is definitely, I would say, a possibility. I would not throw that option out at all, because they absolutely could do that. Final thing, and we'll go with the story elements. Look, if they're not setting up Harry, Norman, I know some people said about, the Lizard, right? Kurt Connors, he was the one that was actually talking to Norman, like, in his lab, so that was probably setting up the Lizard. They can do a lot of things with these characters. We know Venom is in play, right? How do they approach that? Do we get Green Goblin in the second game? I think it's time for the second game really to take it up a notch. One thing that I think has been relatively weak, not necessarily talking about too many of the boss battles in Miles, but one thing that's been weak, I would say almost across the board with Spider-Man so far, is at least the boss battles. And what I will say is boss battles in general in superhero games are very, very hard to pull off. Ask the Arkham games how they've handled that, right? Very, very difficult. So, if they do Green Goblin, do you fight him? How do you handle a situation like that? Venom, I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. So, story-wise, we still have some questions. We don't necessarily know Eddie Brock is in this game, but do they do Venom with Harry? Do they have Norman be Green Goblin? Do you introduce the Lizard? How many? And that's another thing, too, is obviously in a superhero game, you're able to give more villains time, but you still do want to have kind of a central group of, like, who's mainly in charge. Again, if you're jumping around with villains, not to continue to compare it to Batman, but you look at Arkham Knight, you could say, well, Arkham Knight had like 1,000 villains, right? Even with like the side villain, like the mission wheel, that was fine. But even the main thing, Joker became, I would say, the main villain. You had the Arkham Knight, who disappeared for like half the game, like on and off. You had Scarecrow, who disappeared in the game on and off. They were solid when they were there, but you had to like give one of them time, right? Joker got a lot of the time once he got introduced. So I'm not saying again that they're exactly the same games, but if you introduce a lot of different villains in a game, and they're main villains, again, just like the main characters, just like a protagonist, you're going to have to be able to split it. You're going to have to split it. The question is, how do you split it, and do you do it well, right? So that's just, I think, a little hint of what we're going to get with Spider-Man 2. Definitely can make more videos talking about these kind of things if you guys want to see them. Make sure you let me know in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree with me? You think Spider-Man 2 will have some sort of like co-op experience? Let me know. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on so you guys know when all these videos go up. Again, my Twitter, Podcast Now 15, my Discord, and my second channel, Podcast Now Plus, are all in the description below if you guys want to check that out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all on the next video.